Each and every one of these gun control bills in this single title is unserious and unconstitutional and suffers from the problem, the inherent problem that almost all gun control suffers from, and that is criminals do not obey the law. They do not follow the law. Who here today thinks that criminals are going to read the Safe Storage Act and you know, some gang member is going to say, oh, I better lock this gun up or else they'll come and take it? Who here today thinks that a 19-year-old criminal is going to obey the restriction on age for having a gun? Nobody here believes this. These are unserious. But they're worse than that. They're going to compromise the rights and the safety of individual citizens, law-abiding citizens. Let me tell you the story of Nikki Gosser, who's testified here in Congress, and she worked for me in my congressional office. Nikki watched her husband get murdered in front of her viciously in a gun-free zone while her licensed firearm was in her car outside of the restaurant. That haunts her today. Ben and her had just recently been married, and they just wanted to be in this restaurant, and they followed the law, and he was murdered by her stalker in front of her. Now, she went on to get the laws changed in Tennessee to get rid of that gun-free zone. But that's one example, just one example of how all the rest of these are going to fail. The criminals do not follow the law. And the biggest thing we could do that nobody on the other side of the aisle is talking about today is to quit advertising our schools as soft zones, soft targets for defenseless teachers, defenseless staff, and students who aren't being defended. Congress itself in 1990 passed the Gun-Free School Zone Act. It's done more, it's cost more lives than it has saved. Now, some states have been able to override the Gun-Free School Zone Act and create their own areas. And in those states and those school districts where that's happened, where they've allowed qualified teachers and staff to carry, there hasn't been a single mass shooting in one of those schools. There hasn't been a single shooting of one person in one of those schools. The biggest thing we could do here today is to repeal the 1990 Gun-Free School Zone Act, so that the default condition in this country is not to advertise every student as a target. Now, to Mr. Cicilline's point, he was talking about the Supreme Court. You know, in 1995, the Gun-Free School Zone Act was struck down. Why was that? Because this document does not contain the authority to implement a Gun-Free School Zone Act. So what did Congress do? They resuscitated this unconstitutional bill by putting in a provision that says, well, as long as the gun is involved in interstate commerce, well, then we have the authority. Well, I wonder if that's the case with all 6 of these useless bills in here today, because only 2 of the bills say that. It's actually 2 of the bills say it only applies to firearms involved in interstate commerce. Does that mean the other 4 are unconstitutional? Or it actually means all 6 are unconstitutional, and they're trying to save 2 of them with the provision that killed the Gun-Free School Zone Act in 1995. By the way, they overturned Mr. Lopez's conviction, and he went on to serve in the Marines, the one who was convicted of violating the Gun-Free School Zone Act. But Congress came back and resuscitated it, and unconstitutionally so, but there is a conflict between these 6 bills. Some of them recognize the constitutional flaw, and some of them don't. And I want to close with this. Some of my colleagues have said that the assault weapons ban from 1994 to 2004 reduced mass public shootings by 40%. They make up a number a lot of times, but I'll take whatever number they use. Do they know that sales of AR-15 style weapons went up from 1994 to 2004, because it was just a cosmetic ban. So if the assault weapons ban had any effect, how did it have an effect? The ownership and sales and transfer of AR-15 style weapons went up during that period. So I would just close by saying, you can't make a good law by putting 6 bad laws together. It's not going to work. It will infringe on our constitutional rights. And the Democrats don't seem to care. I yield back.